Welcome to 3-Point Firefighter, the podcast where I interview firefighters and discuss all things fire service related, especially those things that fall under what I consider to be the basis of any good firefighter, the 3 points: pride, training, and physical fitness. Since this is my first podcast, and for the next few ones coming up, I had a few issues because I'm new at this. Only small things though, like audio, video, editing, interviewing techniques, nerves, and so on. I'm learning as I go, so stick with me, and hopefully I'll get a little better each time. And to be honest, I've got some great guests coming up. So since this was my first podcast, it was really important to start out with a great guest. I had somebody in mind, but I wasn't sure if he would do it, and I didn't know him. But all it took was an email, and he was in. I'm talking about Jarrod Sergi. Jarrod is a captain at Norfolk Fire Department, and he teaches at fire conferences. He writes articles. He has a blog on fire engineering. But I learned about him through his book, No Nonsense Leadership, A Realistic Approach for the Company Officer. It is hands down one of my favorite fire service books on leadership. I get to talk with Jarrod about his military career, leadership, the fire service, and I expose his hatred for the United States Air Force. Okay, that part might be a little bit exaggerated. The bottom line is Jarrod was a great first guest, and I highly recommend his book. And with that, enjoy my interview with Captain Jarrod Sergi. Again, thanks for being here. It's my very first podcast. And you and your book fit into it in kind of a weird way. So every year we go down to Siesta Key in Sarasota, Florida, me and my wife, and I always get a book, some fire department book, and take it down there. So for quite a few months before we went down there, a bunch of my friends on Facebook were posting this book. And I looked at it, I didn't think about buying it. I was just kind of seeing it every now and then. But I saw it so many times. I'm like, that's a sign. I got to get this book. So, and I've talked to quite a few people. They're like, oh, dude, you got to read this book. It's the book to have. And I love leadership. I'm kind of a student of leadership. I love, 5-alarm leadership, Salka and all those guys. I love it. Oh, yeah. So I finally bought the book, and it sat on my nightstand for about a month or so. And I said, I'm not going to read it. I love reading on the beach, so I'm saving it. So I took it to the beach. I was probably 6 pages in and had to stop already. I was like, wow, this book is amazing. So what I normally do with books is I'll take out either a pen or a highlighter or some little memos, and I'll just kind of put a few in there. That's what I've got so far. Yeah. I mean, this thing blew me away. It's just such a good distilled version of what leadership and what a leader should be, I think. It just knocked my socks off. So I was sitting there talking to my wife about it. She was sitting right next to me, and I would just stop, and I'd close my book, and I'd just sit there and kind of look around, and she'd go, what are you doing? I'm like, man, I got to digest what he just said. He goes, that must be a good book. Yes. I mean, it's just, you really hit leadership at its dead center. Dead center perfect, I think. So go back a little bit, and I wrote an article for Firefighter Nation called 3-Point Firefighter, 3-Point Firefighter. And I was pretty proud of that. And it was basically based on a pyramid of exampleship. And for the 3 legs of exampleship, it was pride, training, and physical fitness. And what I was saying is, if you work on those things just a little bit each day, you're going to be above most firefighters. You're going to keep moving forward. You're going to make your company stronger. You're going to make the department stronger. So when I read your book and I thought about my article, I was like, it just motivated me to do what I'm doing right now. So cool. When I did that, I was like, he's got to be the first guest. And I mean, I've never met you before. I had no idea, but you were very nice about it and said, hey, yeah, I'll do it. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
Good. Thank you very much. So let's start off with, tell me a little bit about you and your department.
Okay. So I've been in my department, which is Norfolk, Virginia. It's a fire department right in the mid-Atlantic. If you're familiar with Virginia, it's the Tidewater area, people refer to it, or the Hampton Roads. So it's 7 cities kind of clustered into one area, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, that area. So I've been there for 15 years. I joined the Navy right out of high school, pretty close to right out of high school, and they shipped me across the country over here to Norfolk, and I just stuck around. And I'd always wanted to get onto a fire department. And when it was time for me to transition out of the military, I was taking tests all over the place. And so Norfolk was the first one that got me. And so I was, vaguely familiar with the city, being a squid out here, I knew how to get from the base to the mall or the base to here. I really didn't know much about the city. So I got hired and went through the academy. Norfolk runs their own internal academy. And then off to the street I went, and it's a great department. It's an old department. We claim to be the third oldest department in the nation. So they were founded a career department in 1871, but they actually existed a long time before that as volunteers. So a lot of tradition. We talk about tradition. A lot of tradition in Norfolk. We have a lot of cool traditions that we still hold on to. But a busy department. Good place to go to fires. Good place to run EMS. We're a fire-based system, which I like, or a fire-based EMS, which I like, and but a small city, so Norfolk's only 62 square miles, I think, 62, 66 square miles. It's got about 250,000 people that live there. And then, of course, the area, there's a ton of military, right? So there's about another 100,000 people, military residents in Norfolk. So pretty happening little place. We got 14 stations, all with an engine company. So we have 14 engines, 7 ladders, 2 heavy rescues, and 12 ambulances, a couple fireboats. So like I said, yeah, it's a fun, busy little place. We run about, I'd say 50 to 55,000 runs a year, something like that for a small little city. I think it's pretty good.
I take it you're on engine 1?
I'm assigned to engine 1 downtown. Mm-hmm.
How long have you been on that one?
Let's see. I've been downtown. So as a captain, I've been there for, I think I'm coming up on just over 2 years down there. And then as a firefighter, I spent some time downtown at engine 2, a neighboring firehouse, for several years.
Yeah. In your book early on, well, I'm not into gotcha journalism, but I'm definitely going to get you on this one. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
It's on the internet. So you clearly hate a certain group of people, and I'm going to bring it up. On, I think it's page 15, you talk about going to a recruiter, and you say, hey, I'd be a soldier if I went to the Army recruiter, on and on and on. You don't mention the United States Air Force. And clearly, Jarrod Sergi hates the Air Force.
Oh, man.
Put it out there.
When Mark listens to this, I don't know if you know Mark alone, when he listens to this, he's going to get a kick out of that because he's an Air Force guy too.
Same here. That's how I got in the military, or got in the fire business, was the military. Uncle Sam said, hey, you're going to be a fireman, and fell in love with it.
Hey, that's great.
I read that, and I was like, well, God damn it.
That's funny.
Actually, and I went very similar to what you did. I was leaving looking at Coast Guard. I just wanted to get in the military. And so depending on the day and the recruiter where I went into, I just landed on the Air Force. So
yeah. And I think, I'm serious about that. Walking up, whoever would have walked out first, I'd have started talking to. And I knew I was leaving. Like, I had already made up my mind, like, I'm joining. I was tilting towards the Navy simply because the girl I was dating at the time, her brother was in the Navy. And so I just heard stories. And I'm like, man, that just sounds cool. But if any one of them would have come out and grabbed me and said, hey, what do you want to do? In fact, looking back at it now, the Air Force, if they would have said, because I told them I want to be a firefighter. So the Air Force is perfect for that. Mm-hmm. As with the Navy, you still do firefighting, but it's not structural firefighting. So it's very different. So if I had to go back and do it all over again, I'd probably rethink some things. But
I tell you what, you talk about the Air Force as a firefighter. Yeah, like when I went to work, it's no different than I go to work now. You go to a firehouse, sit around, you train, you do whatever. It's just you did it in a uniform. As a damage controlman, what was your day-to-day stuff?
Maintenance, a lot of maintenance. So my day-to-day routine was in the Navy in general, but damage control in particular, there's a ton of, they call it preventive maintenance. So it's going through all our repair lockers, which is like the fire stations kind of a thing that's got all the PPE and the tools, going through there, doing inventories, going to all like the fire protection systems, the HFF, the halon, CO2, and like checking the bottles, making sure the tamper seals are there, just little things like that. And then the biggest part, and it was every day it took place, it just depending on whether you were on duty or not, you had to do some training with ship's crew, right? So if people that aren't familiar, like damage controlmen, they say in the Navy, everybody is a firefighter, which I'd be honest, I used to drive me crazy because I just don't think that's true. I think in the heat of the moment, I think there's many people that will step up, and that might be unfair to say to some, but where that comes from is, in port, when there's a fire, there's a duty section that handles the firefighting, right? And a damage controlman is usually one of the ones that's leading the fire team. But that team is made up of cooks, supply, aviation, electronics. That's just not, firefighting is not their gig. and sometimes they may come to the drills, and some are really interested and do a very good job, and some are not, you know? So I used to, when they say, every sailor's a firefighter, I'm like, most are. But a lot of fire, you know, scheduling drills, running drills. It was the damage controlman's job on the ship to get the ship's crew trained up to be good firefighters.
I take it, well, from reading your book, I got the impression that that's where so much of your leadership, or the foundation of your leadership, came from, was the Navy. Was it hard to maybe
Absolutely.
transfer from the military into the civilian life, taking those leadership lessons, especially as a new guy, coming back to like a civilian life as a new person?
It was a little bit, but not as much as I thought. And so I wasn't out of the military, but I want to say just a few months before I jumped into an academy. And, you know, Norfolk's academy, it's basically like, you know, boot camp-esque. It's, you know, it's structured. So I like that, you know, as weird as it sounds, like I like having to be here at a certain time. I like somebody telling me, dude, that's just the way I am.
Right.
So, so the transition into the academy was good. Once I got out of the academy, you know, I really didn't feel like, you know, like, oh man, I'm just like a fish out of water here. I'm not used to the dynamic of the firehouse. Like, I knew how to be the new guy. At least I tried to be. You know, I knew and appreciated chain of command and structure, and don't go to my captain unless I talk to one of the guys. And I had good people in my first firehouse that mentored me well and said, look, like, don't be going in the captain's office with something that you can come to me and we could fix right here, kind of a thing. So I was very used to the way things happen in the military. And when I went to the fire department, I didn't really see a whole lot of trouble with transition. The only thing, some of the things I thought were different were like, you know, military accountability and fire service accountability are two very different things. And I don't think that's just the fire department. I think that's just civilian jobs in general. But, you know, like in the military, when I experienced someone messing up, they were held accountable like that, right? It was made clear that your actions affect the team, and you will either be on restriction and not leave the ship. We're going to dock your pay. You're going to do extra duty. And it was very swift action, as where in the fire service, I would see people do things and I was like, oh man, this guy's done. And it was like, well, that's just Jarrod. You know, it's like, you know, it just, that was different for me. But overall, not a huge, you know, trouble with the transition.
Do you see the fire service today, having been in it as long as you have, like when you came in, you talked about, well, don't take this to the captain. You know, let's settle this here, then we'll move up the chain of command. Do you feel that the fire service is still like that, or do you think with the newer generations that it's kind of getting away from that?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, it's funny because I was talking about that yesterday. I feel like, I don't know, from my view, I feel like it's getting away from that. So I think we're like forgetting the power of just having a conversation with somebody, you know, and I've experienced that a couple times in the fire department recently. Like, you know, somebody will come to me, it's like, hey, someone said this, and there's just like, well, hey, they could just come to me. Like, I'm not the boogeyman, you know? So I think we lose that, like, let's just handle, like in the military, and I'm sure the same way, it was just driven into my head, like, we handle problems at the lowest level, right? Because we can come up with a solution, but if I put it on the captain's desk, he'll have a solution too, but it might not be the solution that we want. So, you know, I think people tend to just run things up the chain of command because that's what's, you know, an introduction and in company in-doc. It's like, you know, you guys can use your chain of command, or you could run right to HR with stuff if you want to. And so it's like, well, hold on a second. Which one is it? Like, absolutely, there's times when we want people to run to HR, you know, stuff like discrimination or sexual harassment. Sure. Absolutely. But the common everyday problems in the firehouse, like, hey, let me just go take this to the captain. It's like, I don't know. Just to give you some examples, you know, I've had guys walk into my office and it's like, hey, I'm having this issue with Tom. I'm like, okay, what's going on? They explain it to me and I'm like, okay, well, have you talked to Tom? Well, no, I really just want to bring it to your attention. I'm like, look, not that I don't care, because I care, but you need to go talk to Tom first. Like, you need to have a conversation and hear each other out in a respectful way and figure it out. If y'all can't figure it out, I could kind of mediate, but you know, y'all are adults.
You wrote about that in your book, and that's another one of those things that I had to stop and kind of think about, because again, the simplistic nature of how you just get boom right to the center of something. And that was one of them where you said somebody brought up a question, the first thing out of your mouth was like, well, did you talk to him? You know, something that simple. And then, I mean, you even go back to it in your last chapter where your 15 things, you know, your nuggets of advice. You talk about, you know, let's get this while it's small. Let's not get it, you know, when it's big and out of control. started in the Air Force as a firefighter, structural crash firefighter. I left there and I was active duty for 3 years. Then I went reserve 2 years. And I went to work for Lexington Fire Department in Kentucky for 8 years. And now I work in New Albany, Indiana, right across from Louisville, Kentucky. I've been here for 15, 16 years. So, and then on top of that, I teach for the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. And the reason I say all this is I get a lot of different views of fire departments. So with what you're saying, I've kind of noticed a shift across the board where some of these generational people don't want to use the tools, the basic tools, right at their fingertips. Like, hey, let me talk to the sergeant about this. Let me talk,
right.
When I came in, your battalion chief or your major almost never heard of a problem. If it got to that level, you got days off or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
So that's what I've noticed. I'll probably take this part out, but I just want to give you a little heads up where I'm at.
So when I was the lieutenant, I was a newly promoted lieutenant. I was in training. I came out of the training division. I went to a company, and there was just a lot of things that people were saying, and I was getting, and it's normal. I think, I was starting to write articles. I was starting to put my opinions out there. And of course, when you do that, you have to deal with people not liking that. And so I would get some, So I would get
everybody did embrace you and say, "Oh, that's perfect."
Yeah, you're so right. But I would hear things like, Jarrod's running his guys into the ground for 8 hours a day. He's doing all this training every day. Like, he's going to drive them crazy. And he's doing, I'm like, where's all this coming from? And I had a feeling I knew where it was, people were taking some of my articles and going to the fire chief and saying, look what he's writing. It was just that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I kind of have a feeling I know where this is coming from. So I'm just going to go right to the source. So I can remember meeting with this person, and I can't remember his rank at the time. He was a chief officer. And I said, hey, look, I want to talk to you about some things because I think there's some things that are stemming from you and some of the conversations that we've had. I said, can we meet at a coffee shop one day and talk about it? And I said, I'm going to say some things that I'm going to be frank and they may piss you off. And I want you to do the same thing to me. And if we can't do that, then we'll just sit here and talk about the weather. And he's like, no, I'd like to have a conversation with you. So we talked, and he gave his opinion and his side of the story, and I gave mine. And in the end, it was great. And after that day, silence. I didn't hear, people still say stuff here and there, but for the most part, it was nothing. In fact, that guy today, I could tell you, is one of my biggest supporters. So it's like, guys, just go have a conversation with somebody. Even if as uncomfortable, as awkward as it may be, it's like, hey, look, we need to hash this out. We got to figure some stuff out here. And in that scenario, I was a lieutenant, so I even gave my captain a heads up. Said, hey, look, I'm going to talk to this chief. I just want to make sure it's okay with you, but I really feel like I need to do it. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, go for it. We were changing some stuff around on our engine company, like testing some attack packages and stuff. And so it was me and a couple other people that were kind of trying to lead some of this change. And there was a couple other officers and chiefs, like, they would go to people on the other shift, like, I don't get why this engine is set up this way, or this is ridiculous. You guys are changing this. And it's like, you can just come to me and just say, hey, Jarrod, what's up? Like, can you go over why we're switching? No problem. Like, I would love to have a conversation with you. And I think as long as people understand why you're doing things, for the most part, it's a little bit easier to digest, but I guess it's just so easy to avoid the conversation because we're humans, right? We're non-confrontational. It's just like, I'd rather not deal with that.
Which is funny in the firehouse, because when we want to be confrontational in the firehouse, we're very confrontational. That switch just flips.
Oh, yeah.
I always wonder why people are like that, though. What's your take on people like, say, for example, messing around with the engine, not coming to you, but running around your back saying something? Oh, we got to...
sun popping up in the background. It used to really bother me when stuff like that would happen, and I would get real frustrated about it. But now I'm at the point where it just kind of, just kind of let it run off my back. And I'm like, if they're that concerned about it, they can come to me. And every now and then, if I get the opportunity, like if we're just using the hose example, I'll look for opportunities to kind of slide that conversation in. Like, we could be talking about baseball and their kids or whatever, and somehow I'll see if I can spin some of their concerns into that conversation. It's like, oh yeah, I was talking with Joe. He was saying you had some questions about the engine company. Like, did you have any concerns about what we were doing? Like, I'd love to explain it to you. And why people are that way. I don't know. I think sometimes it's just their own insecurities. You know, they're not familiar with it, and they are threatened by other people trying to make changes to what they don't understand. And so it's just easier to cut them down.
So talk about your book a little bit more. I noticed you'd mentioned a captain at Station 2 when he first came on. That you'd mentioned him with great regard, but you don't mention his name or anything else about him. I was just kind of curious about that, because it seemed like he made a big impact on you.
Yeah, he did. And I don't mind mentioning his name. I'll mention it here. His name's Brandon Demmel. So he grew up as a junior firefighter up in Pennsylvania. So he's been around the fire service all his life. And then he came down to Virginia for the job. If I remember right, he drove his camper down here and was camping out outside the academy. But no, he was awesome. He was actually my second captain in the fire department when I went to the station. I was on the first station I came out. I was there for a very short time, just enough to get off probation, and then I transferred. And the captain there was awesome too. But this was my first captain that I had being brand new and spent a good length of time with. You know, the captain and the guys before it was they really molded me as a new guy, and it was kind of off you go. And then I was all right, now I'm on my own here. Let me figure some things out. But Brandon was great. You know, he was awesome, and at the time, it was just it's like that crew that you get once in a career, probably. I don't know if I'll ever have that, but it's just everybody wanted to come to work. They loved the job. They wanted to go to fires. They wanted to go to good calls. They wanted to work hard. And he focused on our professional development. He kept us moving. We would do a lot of training, even to the point where it's Brandon, Jesus, man. Probably like I say in the book, I didn't realize what that guy was doing for us until I left. Even when I transferred out of there, even before I was promoted, I went to another station. It's this sucks. As much as even when I griped sometimes about what we were doing over there with him, it was just what that guy did for not only me, but all the other people. And I would say 5 of us that were stationed with him throughout all those years are all promoted now. They're all captains and lieutenants. So, I mean, that's just, that's proof of what that guy has done. I mean, he, not only our professional development, but he's just a good human being. He just took care of us. Great person. You could talk to him. He reinforced, not only the only principles that he believed in, but the departments. And it just, I don't know, he was just an awesome guy. And I was lucky to have a captain like that for all those years, because, I think it molded who I am today. And there's things that I do now with my crew, and I'm whoa, I'm doing the same exact thing that he did to us when I look back at it. Which is good. It's a good thing. And I hope he's proud of that.
Do you find that some of your biggest mentors in the fire service, you didn't realize it at the time, but you got a little distance from them, and you look back on it, and you're kind of oh man,
oh, yeah.
Totally. There's a bunch of people that I've worked with that at the time, I was just I enjoyed working with them, but given a little distance, I'm kind of wow, they really try to bring me up. And I didn't realize, I guess that's some of the best leaders are the ones that are, kind of turning those screws behind the scene. You never even see it. You just, just pick it up.
Yeah, he was great.
You'd mentioned in the book that one of the most important things for a company officer is to be an instructor. I've run into across the country and other places that not every company officer thinks that. They feel like it's the training divisions, and they're just supposed to be there and make sure they're on time and wearing the right uniform.
Right. I have too. And, the training division is there for, the department, right? The training division is there to identify, you're a training officer, right? You're there to identify the needs of the department as a whole, kick recruits out the door if that's what you do. But it's absolutely the company officer's job. When I was in the training division, I used to hear other captains probably heard oh man, what are you guys doing with these rookies? You guys don't teach them anything, and they come to the street and yada yada yada. And it's you're right. We teach them a lot of stuff, but we graduate probationary firefighters.
Right.
It's your job. We have them for 8 months. It's your job to do the rest. And the company officers and instructor, I absolutely believe that is one of their primary roles, right? Because it's you're the guy. If nobody else is going to teach these people to do something, who's going to do it? You may have some self-starters in the group that are going around and they're taking classes, and they're maybe even leading their own company training, but it's got to start with the officer, right? And I talk about this all the time, and it just drives me crazy how we don't see the importance of putting officers in positions or promoting people that take professional development seriously, right? Because, if I do nothing with my guys other than come to work and make sure they're in the right uniform and, just run some calls, and I do nothing to provide them with any training on how to be good firefighters, medics, whatever. And then they promote, and if they haven't been one of those self-starters, like, what are they going to do for their folks?
Right.
Nothing. Like, we shouldn't be surprised by this, So the instructor role that the company officer plays, I mean, it's got to be constant, and you got to take that seriously, which means you have to go out and develop yourself first.
It goes up and down. You're going to love the job. You're going to hate the job. It's just how it works. But
Yep.
sharing that, let them know that, hey, I hated the job too for a while, or hated certain aspects of it. But
yeah, I've been there. Yep. Yeah, I had a spot like that, and and it's funny, and I mentioned some of it in the book, and it didn't last for very long. But when I was a newly promoted captain, this was like a very humbling experience for me. So I got promoted, and I had already, like, in my mind, right, like, I had it all figured out. I said, I'm going to go to a company. I'm going back downtown. I'm going to be a busy company. Like, that's what I deserve. That's where I'm going. And I didn't go there. I went to the slowest station in the city, the slowest house, and it was like, it crushed me. And I'm like, I was just pissed. And so I pouted. I mean, I was the biggest crybaby, and I was like, came to work. I told my wife, like, I don't enjoy coming to work. This is not where I want to be. Like, I don't deserve to be here. Like, why don't they put a senior captain here? Like, I need to be somewhere else. This is not a good fit for me. But I had a crew, right? Like, I still had a crew. And so I had to, I did my best to make sure that they never saw that side of me. They know, and they all know me well enough. They know that my time there, I didn't want to be, to be very long. But I did. I mean, I pouted, but, I look back at that now, and it was like, it really wasn't that bad. It was actually a really good experience for me as a new captain. Like, I learned a little bit about humility. I learned a little bit about, not taking myself too seriously. So it was a really good experience with me in the end. And there were some things that I got to do in that firehouse where, truthfully, I had to put my money where my mouth was, right? So I would talk about all this stuff about leadership and teams, and it's like, well, now this is really, I don't know if it was a test, but this is an opportunity for me to really put some of this into practice. And I left that place, and I thought, in my mind, we had a pretty good thing going. And I was actually, looking back at it now, it was only there a year, but it was a really good year for me, and I enjoyed my time there. So.
Yeah, I was at a smaller house with lots of fire, not a lot of, crappy box alarms. And I got transferred to the headquarters on the engine company, and I hated it. I was miserable, and I blamed everybody. And we were housed with a truck company, and I was like, and after about a year's time, it all switched almost overnight. I was like, the only issue here is me. I'm in my own way. And so I started working working harder on the engine, but I also, because I've been on a truck company, it's just not my thing, and it's a weakness of mine. So what I would do is I would just grab a truckie and say, teach me this, show me this.
I think everybody has that ebb and flow and motivation. I mean, even in short bursts, like, you can go through something like that, and there's times I'll come to work, and it's just, I don't know, life, stuff at home, stuff that's going on in the department. It's like, what, I'm not feeling it today. Like,
wait a minute, Jarrod Sergi goes to work and doesn't do perfect every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My guys will tell you. I mean, it's just, and I think that's normal. And I don't think, if people go through that, doesn't make you a bad firefighter. It doesn't make you a bad officer. It's perfectly normal to feel those. I mean, I've been demotivated where it's like, what, I'm done working on this project. I don't want to do it. And then, a week goes by and I get myself right and I'm back to it. But it's perfectly normal.
I agree. You mentioned earlier about uniforms, and in the book you mentioned, that's one of the things you discuss is looking professional. Some people, and I agree with you, some people see it as the smallest fraction of what we do, and because of that, it's of smallest importance. I'm of the thinking that it's kind of the foundation starting up. If you look professional, you act professional, and we are a uniform service.
I was always taught, even in the military, your appearance reflects your interest. I've heard that for years, so, and it's the military in me. It's not going away. Like I probably mentioned it in some form other than the book, but it's like, I'm the tucked in t-shirt guy, I am, and I don't mean to be a jerk about it. It's just, that's just me. And if people can criticize me for it, and that's okay. And I welcome it. It's like, I get it. But, when we go out the door, we look like professionals, I've relaxed that a little bit, it's not like I'm doing uniform inspections in the morning. That's not it. But, during the day, we look squared away, and I ask people, like, look, if Joe Citizen walks in or the fire chief walks in and you look like that, like, I'm not telling you to change right now, but just think about it. Like, think about your appearance to the public, to the fire chief, to, the department that you represent. How do you look? At nighttime, I've got a little lax. Like, if people roll out the door and it's 3 a.m, it's like, we're at a busy station. It's their 10th call of the night. And I look over and their shirt's untucked and they're helping, Miss Smith into a stretcher. Like, I've gotten better about that. But there's been plenty of times when like, hey man, tuck your shirt. And they're like, and they don't ever give me like, oh, no problem. They do it. But no, I think absolutely a good uniform appearance goes a long way. Like I said, your appearance reflects your interest as far as I'm concerned.
You talk about your book too, about when you get a new assignment as an officer and you don't come out of the gate really with your expectations and all that. You kind of watch how they work and then you have that conversation. You also mentioned the difficulty of being a younger officer with an older crew versus an older officer with a younger crew. So what were some of the issues with all that?
Huge difference. So 2 places I've been as a new lieutenant, my crew was, I would say, on the younger side as far as age and tenure. And then now as a captain, my crew is on the younger side. Most, I would say, are junior to me with time and age. But the crew I had as a captain, a brand new captain, most of them were senior to me, right? Like 20 years. They were older than me, So, man, you talk about a difference. And, what I had to be careful about, like, the expectations and things, can you imagine if I went in there like day 1 to Station 12 as a new captain with my driver who's got 25 years and the other guy who's got 20 years, the one guy behind him has got 18, another's got 10. It's like, all right, look, guys, I'm just going to go over one, they're feeling me out too. So it's like, man, we get this new captain. He's full of piss and vinegar. Great. What do we have to deal with here? And then at first day, I'm like, all right, this is what we're going to do. They looked at me like, come on, bro, So I had to kind of pump the brakes with that approach to that older crew. And I wanted to focus on building relationships first with them. Like, I wanted to earn their trust and I wanted to show them, like, I wanted to be there with them. I wanted to help them develop professionally. And look, they're later in their career, like 20-year guys, so it's like they've been around a long time. I wanted to try to show them, like, hey, we're going to do the basics, but let me just show you some things that people have showed me. Maybe you've seen it before. And with what I found myself having to do with them is, instead of saying, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to do 3 hours of training, because they'd be like, oh, God, 3 hours, I would say, look, we're going to go out and do some stuff. When we're done, we're done. Like, we're going to train to a standard and we're going to train so everybody gets it. If that takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours. If it takes 30 minutes, then we're done, So I would go out and I would show them something. I would try to add some value to what they already know. Then we go back to the station. As far as I'm concerned, the rest of the day was theirs. I don't care if they watch TV. I don't care if they read. I don't care if they put their feet up. I don't care if they take a nap. That stuff doesn't bother me. If they put in the time in the morning to do what we're supposed to do and they learned something that day, then that was fine by me. And that's how I approached that senior crew. And then the other thing was, at the time, I think I had, 12 years. I was like, hey, I only got 12 years here. And I used to tell them all the time, like, look, I know I'm the captain here, but like, I look forward to learning from you guys too. And so one of my drivers, Mike, he was the senior driver there. I would always run things by him. I'd say, look, Mike, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And he would give me his advice. So, just simply something like respecting your elders, Poor Mike, if he listens to this, I'm not calling him old, but, but just something like that. Like, hey man, like, you've been in this fire department for 25 years. You're a senior driver. You've been on this planet longer than I have, like, dealing with people and things like that. This is what I'm doing. What do you think? So I always tried to make sure that they knew I was humble in my approach to trying to teach them some things. And I think that made it easier for them to buy into what I wanted to do with that station ultimately.
This one was talking about you and your companies. You say bringing value to the team. You set that right off the bat. How can I bring value to the team? How can you bring value to the team? And again, I love that approach. There's so much said in so little a sentence. Is that something to this day you still follow with, or people come up to you now and say, hey, look, I'm going to bring value to this. I'm going to add to this team's, success. Because that seems like a great starting point.
I do. So I do it when I sit down and I give them my expectations. Like, like, and it's easy, like when I sit down, like I just did it yesterday, we had a girl, she just got to the station. So I sat down with her, gave her my expectations and said the same exact thing. But as a group, that's what I tell them. I said, look, while I'm the captain here, my job is to add value to the team. No different than any of you. So, that's what I'm here to do. And then I reinforce that any chance I get. So what I do is every like 3 to 4 months. So there's 12 to 14 people on my roster at the station. They're always doing things. They're taking classes. They're doing this. So I don't, it's hard to follow what everybody's doing sometimes. So every few months I sit down with them and I say, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? What are you working on right now? What do you want to work on? All right. And then I basically move that into like, look, your job here as a team member is to bring value to the team. And this is what I see that you do. This is what I think you can do. And is there anything else that you think you can do, to continue to add value to the team? And they're pretty good about it. They'll say, yeah, I do this or that or whatever. But it's more of constantly challenging them to see, to look inside their own head and say, well, what am I bringing to the table? What am I bringing to the team? So as long as they're constantly doing that themselves, and I try to do that as well, then the team seems to stay kind of harmonious,
Kind of like an informal performance review, just between
exactly.
you and your.
Okay. That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Now, do you have an actual formal performance review in your department that you go by to?
We do. So it's all based off your birth month. So whenever your birth month rolls around, you sit down, you do a performance evaluation. And I think ours has gotten better, actually. So you do a performance review, and then we have a mid-year review, which is optional, but I do them. And then we also have this thing that I like, and again, it's optional, and I don't do it all the time, but I've done it with certain people, is where they do a self-evaluation, like you give it to them, they do a self-evaluation, I do my evaluation on them, and then we kind of compare and say, are we close? Are we off? And then we have the conversation. So I do that every year with them, and I really, really try to take those seriously. I'm a bit of a nerd. I really believe in performance evaluations, and I think sometimes the firehouse gets busy, and it's hard to remember to just sit down with somebody and be like, all right, look, what are you working on? What are your goals? Whatever. And so if you didn't get that opportunity, now's the time with the performance evaluation. So I think if people take those things seriously, you can have some really good, productive conversations.
And I think that falls back on accountability too. You'd mentioned that earlier, that you do the review and then holding their feet to the fire. If you say, hey, you need to work on your ladder skills, you need to work on EMS, and then following it up a little bit more. When I was in Lexington, Kentucky, your first year, you got a review from your captain every month. And then once you hit your year mark, I believe it was like once a year.
Yeah.
And I like it. I'm kind of like you. I want somebody to give me direction, put bumpers up. And when I start straying, that's just how I like to work. And so every month it was, hey, you're improving on this, or you're sucking on this. And as a new person, I think it was a great tool because you weren't able to stray very far. Every month, if you screwed up on a fire or EMS or didn't wear a uniform right, you're late to work, which I'll never understand, firemen late to work. That's a whole nother podcast, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But I really enjoy that. I don't think a lot of people want to hear what they can do better.
And it's nice to have them tell you, because when I sit down with them and they're like, well, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to promote, I want to whatever, and I write these things down, and when I sit back down with them again, I could say, look, like this is what you said, and this is what you are either doing or not doing. Like, you're telling me you want to do all this, but what I'm seeing is totally different. So, like, are you telling me this just because you want to get out of the office quicker, or are you telling me this because this is truly what you want to do? Because if it is, I'll help you get there. But you got to help yourself too, and this is how we're going to do it.
I agree. I think it's a very underused tool, and I remember too. To be fair, I probably didn't like every single sit down for every review, and especially when you hear something negative. But I love the idea of what you do, doing kind of an informal one, because again, it goes back to like being the new guy and get one every month. Every few months, people can't stray too far.
Right. And I think people want to know. People want to know that. Again, at least it's me, right? I think most people want to come to work and work for somebody who has a vested interest in their success, right? Like, I say it all the time, like I'm kind of an optimist, right? But I don't think people graduate the academy, like, and raise their right hand and be like, man, I just can't wait to get out there and suck. There's some people that slip through the cracks. Let's face it. They join the fire department because they're trying to get some insurance because their side hustle pays way more. And those people are out there, let's face it.
Oh yeah.
But I think the majority of people want to do well. And so if they come to work and they're like, wow, this person actually gives a damn about where I'm trying to go in the department and what I'm trying, like they're a little bit more apt to step out of their comfort zones and do some things. So I always try to encourage that type of approach to their development.
And that goes back to what you said in the book quite a few times about being the example. So if you're not being the example, but you're telling somebody, hey, you need to start working out more, but you're, overweight. That's like going to a dentist with horrible teeth, right? You're like,
right.
I'm not going to listen to anything you say. Speaking of that real quick, I want to talk about that in your book. You have a story about telling your crew, hey, listen, we're going to PT at least 20 minutes a day. And then you go to the track and you notice there's some lollygagging there. So tell me a little bit about that, because I feel like there's a little bit more in that that's not in the book.
Oh, that was a funny story, and I'm gonna have to let one of the guys that I had to get on listen to this podcast because he'll get a laugh out of it. So yeah, we go, and we're going to the track and we're running around, and these guys are walking, and in fact we finish, and I'm like lapping them. I'm like, so I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, look, I'm not asking you to be, an Olympic all-star out here. Just get your heart rate up. And so we're walking around and we finish, and I'm chilling out, and one guy lights up a cigarette. And that's what it was like. I was like, look, guys, cigarette. When we come out here as a crew, I expect everybody to PT. I don't expect you to be an all-star. I don't expect you to go out here and sprint on the field, but I expect you to get your heart rate up, And that's all I said. And every time I would go out there, we'd leave PT, and months later, here we are. We're all in a gym. We're working out together, and we had a blast, And it was all because. And I'm no fitness guru, but, I tried to lead by my own personal example. And, people always ask me about motivation. Like, how do you motivate people? Man, figure that one out and let me know, because I don't know. I don't try to motivate people. I just try to inspire them and, with my own attitude and actions and just bringing them on board and sharing my enthusiasm. I can only cross my fingers and hope that motivates them. But for me to say, all right, well, this is what you do this to them, have this conversation, and that's going to motivate them. I struggle with that. I really don't know how to motivate people. And that may sound weird, but that's just the truth.
Well, and I also think that not everybody can be motivated. Right. I totally understand when people want to come to the firehouse, sit on the couch and watch TV all day, don't make any runs, and get a paycheck. I understand it.
Oh,
I like it.
Yep.
I get where you're coming from. Hey, man,
right.
That's great. Yeah. But my issue comes when those people are in leadership roles too. But
our deputy chief came by, and like everybody else, we have problems with retention, right? People are going in, they're getting hired by the fire department, they're leaving for other jobs. Sometimes, totally non-fire service related. They just move on, and it's people. The days of people coming and staying 40 years in the fire service are, that just doesn't happen a whole lot anymore. And so he came in, we're eating lunch, and we're asked, hey, Chief, what's going on? And he's making some small talk with us. And he's like, look, we asked, what is he working on? He's like, look, if anybody has any ideas on how to keep people from leaving the department, I'm all ears. He's like, because I'm fresh out of ideas. And so guys are saying some stuff, and I was just fine. I said, look, I think it's going to continue to happen, and we just need to we need to get used to that being the norm. I think if people come in the fire department and the fire service is not in their heart, then something better comes along, they're gone. That's just the simple truth of the matter. Some people want to come in and they want to be public servants, and they want to go to fires, and they want to go on good calls, and they want that team camaraderie. And, some people want that couch and Wheel of Fortune and some benefits till something better comes along, and off they go, Yeah. And that's just the truth.
You said it earlier too, that some people see this job as the second job. My off-duty work is, I come here to rest. And I've had people say that, I come here to rest. I'm like,
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I'd hate for someone, to lose their life in a fire, and you say, well, to be fair though, this is really my second job. So I didn't have to try that hard. Yeah. I'll come here tomorrow and mow your yard. It'll be beautiful. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah. We're not going to pay out any benefits to your family. Hopefully your first job could do all that for you, Yeah.
When you talk about, let them feel your absence when you leave, or don't let them feel your absence when you leave. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. So when you got your crew trained, okay, and they know they're coming to work with their shirts tucked in, and then we're going to go to the track, and we're going to get our heart rate up. Probably not going to smoke cigarettes. What about when you get that floater from outside? That's the problem child that I'm not going to work out. I'm not going to train. I'm just here for 12 hours, or whatever. It's kind of the opposite of what you're talking about, but how do you deal with that?
So if I get somebody So like, let's say I'll give two scenarios. If I get somebody that comes in like on a fill-in, I say they're there for the day. I go up to them and I'd say, look, this is what we have planned for the day. I know you're filling in today or you're on an overtime shift. This is what we got going on. I just put it right to them and say, look, we're doing this. And normally our department's pretty good about it. Like rarely have I had to say, and it's only been a couple times, like, look, like the crew's out there doing something and then they're watching TV. I just simply walk and say, hey, look, I know you're on an overtime shift or you're filling in, but I expect 100% participation from everybody that's on the truck. And usually I've never gotten any kickback, not like, no, I'm good here. I'm just filled in. I haven't experienced that. They might get up and they might grumble, but they're going to go out and they're going to participate. And if they don't, sometimes the guys will shame them into doing that. Now, on the flip side, I've had where, they're part of the crew and, whether they transfer in or something and they're that way, then that's a different story for me, right? Because then I sit down, I've likely had the time to go over my expectations, and I sit down with them and I explain it right to them. Like, look, we're doing this or we're participating in this and you were not. There's a simple solution to fix this. You get up, you participate, you ask. Like, I don't expect you to get out and push people out of the way and get to the front and ask questions, but I do expect you to be out there and listen and hopefully learn something. And if we can't do that, then we can move into the next phase of fixing this problem. But I'm giving you the easy way out here. And so, and most times when they come out, I don't beat them down or like, oh, let me just keep asking him some questions since he was the one that was on the couch. Like I make fun, I have a good time with it. We learn something. And then most times, even if that person doesn't want to admit it, they walk away like, all right, well, that really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I actually picked something up or, maybe I even interjected. And sometimes we can put on them like, hey, hey, Tom, what do you think? Like, does what I'm saying make sense? Do you have anything else to offer? So, I've been lucky in that sense to where I don't think I've ever had anybody say, yeah, no, Cap, I'm good. I'm going to sit right back here on the couch.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a level of expectation for you too. Hey, I'm traveling to, Jarrod's engine or whatever. They know what to expect.
Yeah, I think so.
Gets in that mindset a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. And, it's just, I'm lucky. Like on my shift, the people even that fill in from across the city, they're great. Like we do stuff and they jump right in. And like I said, maybe it's because they know the guys there. They know me well enough to say, yeah, you know what? Like I'm here. Let's do this. No big deal. I'm back to my firehouse tonight. And it's a non-issue,
We had my favorite is when recruits come out and they're doe-eyed, they'll do anything you want and they're terrified to open their mouths and stuff. And in Lexington, we had this one recruit that turned out to be a really good fireman, but his first day, he was bringing in, one of the first things he did, he brought in his sleeping bag and pillow, and we're all sitting around having our coffee. He said, hey, Cap, listen, I'm going to be in the back room, take a little nap, and if you need me, just give me a holler.
No way.
He was totally fucking around. I was like, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot. But we all sit and drink our coffee. We're like, what the fuck he say?
That's a good one. I'm going to have to remember that. I may have to, like, next time a rookie comes out, just kind of like, hey, man, just joke between me and you. Go in the lieutenant's office with a sleeping bag. And
yeah. So, I'm going to take a nap. If you don't mind getting me up around noon for lunch. Yeah. I like burgers, if that's all right.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah. And then be even better if you're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem, man.
Yeah. Yep. I'll have to get in on it, too. The lieutenant could be like, man, did you hear what the recruit said? Like, yeah, man, I just – he's tired, man. Just let him sleep. Well, the lieutenant would lose his mind. Like, what the hell's happening around here?
This is his second job, man. He's a hell of a landscaper. So
yeah.
just
right. Yeah. He's doing my house tomorrow. Yeah.
Just don't wake him. I want him fresh when he weed eats.
That's right.
I want to wrap it up here, but I do want to bring up one more thing. You talk about the fishbowl analogy, and that's one of my favorite things that there's a story about that for me personally. Is I was working at when I was complaining a whole lot. I was working for a lieutenant on an engine company, and my job in the morning was really simple. You clean the shitters. And I don't mind cleaning shitters, but clean the shitters. Well, the other crew, I'm pretty sure they just would shave their pubic hair and throw it everywhere on the sink and the toilet and pee on the floor. So I would bitch about it every day. And then my boss got tired of it. My lieutenant got tired of it. And he pulled me aside just as cool as a cucumber and said, look, what's your job when you come to work? Clean the bathrooms. Okay, so if they're clean or they're dirty, you're doing your job. Just do your job. Don't worry about the other shift. Right. When you come to work, this is our firehouse. This is our truck. If it's low on fuel, let's get fuel. If it's dirty, let's clean it. don't waste effort on the other crews. And so when I read that in your book, I kind of got that same vibe. I'm like, wow, that's actually, I think that's something I wish somebody told me earlier in my career. I probably still would have bitched and cried though, but that was one of those.
Oh yeah, that's how we are.
Yeah, right. It was one of those moments I was like, wow, that's really true. You just fucking do my job. And I think that's one of the things I share with new recruits too, is like, when you get out, just shut up and do your job, at least for a year. And then you can start building these relationships a little bit better and learning the do's and don'ts, but just do your job. It's not that hard.
And I think that's something, like, I know for me, that's something I have to constantly even remind myself, like, because I'll see things, guys will come, oh, this happened on the other shift. And it's like, and there's been times where I'm like, why didn't they take care of that? And I try not to gripe about it in front of the guys, but it's like, let's take care of it. Or, I see guys will come in from another city or another part of the city, or I'll go to an incident, I'll go to this fire and things don't go so well. And I'm like, why did this company do that? And like beat my head against the wall. Like, what are they doing over there? And then at the end of the day, I realized, I have absolutely zero control over that. None. I don't. I could be frustrated by it. Maybe in a roundabout way, I could try to help that person out. But for the most part, I can't. It's not my crew. It's not my station. It's not my shift, whatever. So, I really try to just worry about my fishbowl, like my station on my shift at station one, my guys. Not that I don't care about anybody else, because I do, but I don't have control there. So I could just stay frustrated and gripe and complain and why aren't they doing this or that? Or I could just say, look, I'm just going to do this with my guys and everything's hunky dory, and hopefully other people see that and they try to follow the same example.